Okay, so I'm going to speak on behalf of why mandatory minimum sentencing is not the solution to solving the problems that we've been having with the war on drugs. And to explain this, I'm going to basically use a behavioral approach. I've got a few analogies. One is going to be in regards to what a mandatory minimum sentence is. It's pretty much like a one-size-fits-all t-shirt. Most of the time, you're never going to find a t-shirt that adequately fits everybody. And usually, in order to have a one-size-fits-all, it would mean that for most people, that t-shirt's going to be a little too big, which is what we see with mandatory minimums. Mandatory minimums is pretty much a one-sentence-fits-all. It states that for specific crimes, there is a sentence set in place by Congress that mandates, district courts to sentence individuals based off of the crime that they've committed, in regards to these mandatory minimums. There's an example that, took place in Utah of a judge that was mandated to sentence a 24-year-old to 55 years in prison over a first offense possession of marijuana and a firearm. There were obviously more logistics to the case that I'm not going to spend, all the time going into, but the bottom line is, after pages and pages and trying to alter this sentence, the judge was forced to issue this mandatory minimum to this 24-year-old. So that's what we get when we look at this whole one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to mandatory minimums. And this was put in place originally in the 50s to try to keep the drug trafficking under control. Then you jump into the 70s where they pretty much overturned all of the mandatory minimums set in place because they wanted to try to find punishments more suitable to the crimes at a case-by-case basis, which is ideally what you're going to want to do in most situations. Well, then we get into the 80s, and there is the crack cocaine epidemic, and the cartel starts booming, and you're going to look at your cartel, and you're going to have your distributors, you're going to have your dealers, you're going to have the people that are involved in making the product. Then you're going to have your addicts that are, have this addictive behavior to constantly buy the product that's available to them. That's what keeps the drug trade moving. You've also got your law enforcements behind the drug trade, which is going to be your DEA agents, your, police officers, your private investigators, everyone behind, trying to stop the war on drugs. But the bottom line is when it comes to behavior, and this is where another analogy comes in, it's going to be similar to as if you had a dog that didn't follow basic commands. It doesn't sit when you tell it to sit. It doesn't, walk right on a leash. Everything that you would want in your dog in terms of obedience is not there. So what you do is you drive over to a farm, drop your dog off at a farm for 3 weeks. Okay, you pick the dog back up from the same farm, and you bring the dog home. No one spent time with the animal, no one focused on fixing the problem within, and the dog still won't sit when you tell it to sit. It still won't walk right on a leash. It's not trained, it's not obedient. Now you take the same dog, you drop it off for 3 weeks at a farm with individuals there that put time into working with the animal. They're going to spend, those 3 weeks completely, rearranging the animal's behavior so that when you take that dog home, it sits when you tell it to sit. It walks right on a leash. That's what we're essentially doing with these prisoners that are convicted of drug crimes. As of right now, it is estimated roughly that 78% of all convicted felons are not even just felons, but any inmate serving time are serving on a mandatory minimum, which, yes, most of the time is your felons. So what we're doing with these mandatory minimums is we're saying that, okay, if you get caught, we're going to make examples out of these people. We're going to operate correctional facilities at over a 36% capacity rate, meaning past capacity, which is where we're at, and that's at the taxpayer's expense. So mandatory minimums are just taking these people off the streets, sticking them in a correctional facility where they're around, hundreds of other convicts, and we're expecting to release them after, absurd amount of time without ever trying to alter their behavior. So when an addict's released back out, after serving their 5 years or however long they're, being convicted for, let's say they were convicted for, possession of heroin. So you have a heroin addict that serves 5 years, and now they're being entered back into the, to society, and they're going back to the same people that they were with originally. They're doing all the same things they did prior to their conviction. Chances are, yes, they're going to come in contact with heroin again. They may get, charged with conviction of heroin again. And yes, there's that fear factor that if I get caught again, now we have the 3 strikes rule, and if I get caught again, my sentence is only going to be worse, and so on and so forth, which is pretty much what the mandatory minimum, is a scare factor into trying to do, is trying to, scare these convicts into being released and never, repeating these behaviors, but they were never taught how to change their behavior. They were never taught how to be released and not rely on their drug of choice and, ways to resist their temptation. Same with people that have built a lifestyle off of the money that they've made from the drug trade. You're going to now release them into society where they've obtained, no real skill sets to find anything else. And yes, I'm aware that, correctional facilities offer classes and they offer, PI programs and things like that, but at the same time, a lot of it's just, passing time during your conviction, and some people aren't even granted that opportunity. So you may have someone that never, ever was able to obtain a new skill set. They never were able to obtain any of the resources needed to release them into society and allow them to fix this problem and to not go back into what they were doing before because that was their source of income. So we're not fixing any of these behaviors, and that is why there is, over a 50%, relapse rate for inmates that have been convicted. That's why there are so many people serving on their second and third offenses, because there was never any time put into altering these behaviors to fix the problem. So, and it's more cost effective, and it's a lot more successful when you use options such as drug court or rehabilitation programs and other incentives out there to change and alter these behaviors. And, leaving a rehabilitation program, the relapse rate is so much lower than somebody that was just forced to serve on a mandatory minimum. So it's all about the behavior. It's the same concept as the dog analogy. If you're not putting them in an environment, where they have the resources and the means and the people that care enough to fix the behavior and fix the problem, you're never going to see a change in the behavior when that individual is released. And that is how the drug trade and everything else continues to flow, because it's basically just recycling in and out all these people that are involved. You can convict one person, but it just means that whoever's under them is going to step up during their time in terms of the cartel. You can get 3 addicts off the street, but that doesn't mean that the next day they're releasing 3 addicts right back into the same community with the same behaviors that they had. So if you look at this from a behavioral approach, it is only rational to understand that behavior needs to change for the problem to change. And the war on drugs are, used to alter your state of mind. There's so many different forms and things out there, and, it's something that becomes an addictive behavior. And, human behavior is so simple yet so fascinating, because when an individual becomes addicted to something, whether it's good or bad for them, it becomes a lifestyle. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of support to rearrange that lifestyle. And almost anyone can compare, to what it feels like to have something that means so much and plays such a large role in your life, and to try to just, get rid of that or quit something like that cold turkey. It does take, sometimes it takes detox and severe rehabilitation. And yes, I am aware that some people do go to prison and they may come out and just turn away from that lifestyle completely. And I do understand that there's some people that have gone through rehabilitation and come out and go right back into their addictive behaviors. But the bottom line is to think about this rationally. You have to think in terms of percentages. So many more, criminals and people that have had that addictive behavior that are released from their, minimum sentencing, there's way more that are going to turn back to that lifestyle than if they were to have been put through some kind of program, rehabilitation, detox, anything along those lines. So that is why it is only rational to explain that mandatory minimum sentencing is in no way a solution to the war on drugs from a behavioral approach.